Welcome to the Healing Place podcast, a space filled with inspirational stories of hope, along with practical advice for your healing journey. Your host is Teri Wellbrock, trauma warrior, writer, speaker, blogger, therapy dog handler, and founder of the Sammy's Bundles of Hope project. As a survivor and a thriver, Teri's mission is to shine the light of hope into the world by interviewing insightful guests from across the globe. Please stay tuned at the end of today's interview as we honor our sponsors. The Healing Place podcast is a fiscally sponsored project of Fractured Atlas. Now, here's your host and trauma warrior, Teri Wellbrock.
Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock, and thrilled to have with me today Michael Jascz. Michael is coming to us from, and I have to look at my notes because of menopause brain, Executive Director of the Relationship Foundation, which is a nonprofit in New York City. And he is here to talk to us specifically today about nonviolent communication as a tool to mitigate trauma. So welcome, Michael.
Good to be here. Nonviolent communication is based, it's a book by the authors Marshall Rosenberg, and it's something that, it's a tool, a communication skill set that we've been introducing primarily to schools in New York City. We have a curriculum, so we have it outlined in our curriculum also, which we've sold to schools around the country as well as social service organizations. And the way that I got into this work was I had been doing relationship coaching. And about 13 years ago, I was coaching an administrator who had gone through a very difficult 18-year marriage, which he described in one word: torturous. Now, we might know some people that have been in torturous relationships. And he said he never wanted to get married again, and he hated women. And after a couple months of coaching with him and specifically introducing the NVC work, he said, I've changed my mind. I do want to get married again. And would you come in and speak to a group of boys in my high school, junior boys? And I said yes, because I couldn't find the no. And I went in and I started speaking with them about relationship dynamics, and I could see they weren't listening. And something I did that's really out of character, I stood up like a drill sergeant and I said, "Listen up." And then very quiet. And I continued. And later that day, the administrator who brought me in wrote an email to the principal saying he had not seen a group of boys transformed in 42 minutes in his 10 years in the school. Would I teach relationship ed as a component of health ed? Now imagine if we had had a relationship roadmap growing up, if relationship education was along with health ed and nutrition and all the other things that kids study besides their normal subjects. And I went into the school and I began sharing ideas. I don't generally say the word teaching because I'm a student myself and I'm learning every day. So we say that we're introducing this work and we work with people, but I stay away from the word teacher. And that began the process, and schools began to find out about us year after year. And now we have a curriculum and a book. And most recently, we've been working with schools remotely. And a administrator in the city found out about our book, which we put up for no charge after everything shut down. And she contacted me and said she couldn't download the book. So I'm not religious, but I say by the grace of God, she couldn't open up the book. And I looked her up, and she is an administrator for culture and climate in all of New York City. And I said I'd be happy to do a workshop for your parents. And she said, "Great, absolutely, but would you speak with principals and their support staff for 250 schools?" So as of today, we've given our workshop with over 400 schools in Manhattan and in Queens, and we're really grateful to be getting the word out, not only about NVC, but also about trauma.
Yeah. So what is nonviolent communication? Can you define it for us and talk to us about it?
Well, nonviolent communication is based on, as I said, Marshall Rosenberg's book by the same name. And there's 4 components to nonviolent communication: observation, needs, feelings, and requests. And what we focus on mostly is the needs and feelings. But observation in its simplicity would be being able to look at the world without judgment. Now, that's easy to say. We go to lectures, we hear speakers, they say, try to do this non-judgmentally. Well, I have a lifetime of programming to judge people. So it's understanding more about how people operate based on their needs and feelings that helps to reduce the judgment. So we've always seen from the beginning that nonviolent communication is a way to reduce the judgment. Will it ever go away entirely? Well, maybe if we get this work introduced when kids are really young, they'll have very little judgmental thinking, and they'll be able to say when they say, oh, that was really stupid, to somebody. In fact, before they even say that, they might ask themselves this question: does this need to be said? And just feel what's going on, their upset, their concern, their worry, their frustration. They'll be able to feel that and say, oh, well, what are my needs? I have a need for understanding. I have a need for respect. And so they might phrase their sentence like, when you did this, I felt disturbed and anxious, and I have a need for efficiency and effectiveness and competence. Could you tell me what's going on? Now, we don't talk like that.
Right.
But if we start practicing talking like that, then it'll be more in our thinking process. So we might not use exactly that language, but we'll have a reference for how are we looking at other people and how might we word our concerns to stay connected. How might we
pull the needs screen up?
Yeah, let's pull the needs up for a moment.
Okay. Hold on. All right. There we are. Needs, needs, needs.
These are words that we all know: integrity, inspiration, love. Now, I've also, as I said, done coaching with individuals and couples. So acceptance, affection, appreciation, care, closeness, companionship, consideration, friendship, all of these play out in significant other couples. It plays out in every relationship. Now, what was interesting for me was I dedicated my book to my parents, who I often spoke about in therapy, which I don't do therapy anymore, because I realized that my parents were doing the best they could with what they learned from grandma and grandpa, who were born when the light bulb was relatively new. Right. What did they know? It was about survival. Now, with the 60s and pop psychology and all the ways we're beginning to understand the human psyche and the brain development, now we can look at things like needs and feelings. So because my mother, I think, struggled in many ways with depression, I don't recall getting this nurturing. So now I see it on the second column, the bottom of the list is warmth. Warmth is an important need for me. Not everybody, but not having that as a child. But in the schools, when we're in the schools, competence, consciousness, contribution. What's important to students? Discovery, creativity, growth. Now, when a student doesn't understand something, instead of the teacher saying, what's the matter with you? Why don't you listen? Can't you get this? And this is what sort of triggers kids and brings up the trauma again, is for a child to be able to say, I need clarity. Clarity. Yes, and understanding. So the teacher says, oh, would you stay after class? I'll help you get this. Because teachers now, what we're explaining to them is they have needs and feelings. So in class, they have a need for order. They have a need for peace of mind, harmony, so that when there's the disturbing behavior in the classroom, they can say, I'm feeling disappointed and anxious because I have so much I want to share with the class today. And I did this in one of the classes that I taught, and I could see the teacher was getting upset. And I said to the rest of the class, the 54 kids, what do you think Miss Smith is needing right now? She needs learning and integration and contribution. Okay, and how is she feeling? And we'll look at the feelings list. So when your needs aren't met, we say, I don't feel good about this. So good is not a feeling. So here we have what we call feelings associated with met needs. We don't call them good feelings because what's good to one person might not be good to another person. So amazed, inspired, motivated. How am I feeling right now? I'm feeling motivated. I'm feeling inspired. I'm definitely feeling grateful. Look at this list. Appreciative, thankful, touched, moved by having the opportunity to share this work. So this is now putting me in touch with feelings that I would prefer to have: being thrilled, being relaxed, being calm, comfortable, intrigued, curious. Oh, this is not rocket science. Here's a list of maybe 35 words. And if we get in touch with, like, what am I needing? And for instance, what I need, the need that I have that's strongest for doing this work is a need for contribution, a need for purpose. So many people go to work every day when they went to work, and those needs for purpose and meaning and contribution weren't met. So how can I get those needs met at work? How can I get those needs in my community so I can feel happy, so I can feel peaceful, so I can feel satisfied? Being able to describe who you are, what you want in terms of your needs and feelings opens up this broad space of creating connection. That's such an important need, and I think many people need this connection. Notice I don't say we all need connection. Maybe if you're a monk, you don't need connection. You sit on a rock in a mountain, and you go into bliss. So one of the things about the NVC is we practice looking at how most of us might want. We use language like, well, many of us want, or most of us, it seems that. And this way we're not making blanket statements. So when our needs aren't met, how do we feel? And now we're going to go to the list of feelings associated with unmet needs. So this list is a bit longer because we have more struggle in the world. So if I'm not getting my needs met, let's say for contribution, for progress, for competence, I'm feeling disappointed, I'm feeling nervous, I'm feeling anxious. If somebody says or does something that upsets me, I might be worried, but I might be angry, I might be annoyed. Now, notice that my vocabulary is increasing where I can get in touch with the broad range of feelings. And this is all on 2 pages. 3 pages, really. We put the needs and feelings on 1 page. The needs met and unmet needs on 1 page. And so we don't need 375 pages on the vocabulary of what our needs and feelings are, as we get used to using this and practicing expressing who we are in terms of our needs and feelings, just like you would practice a sport, a language, a musical instrument. And after a while, first day you bang on the piano, it's not sounding so interesting. After a week, after 2 weeks, after a couple months, then the needs and feelings gets into your thinking process, gets into your veins, just like playing a sport or a musical instrument. So I'm very passionate about these few pages. They're on our website. People can download them for no charge. We want to share these tools to create more connection.
Yeah. And so it's a matter of just teaching kids, teaching folks, you said, in the hospitals as well as schools and whoever else wants to utilize this, how to speak in these languages or using these words for their individual needs, so that we can understand one another.
You're right. That's about understanding. Yeah. So Like for instance, you can have multiple feelings at the same time. So before I go on a video, a camera, or in front of teachers or in an audience, I feel nervous. I feel worried. I feel uh, concerned because I got the message as a kid that you're not doing this right. So I got all these messages, and as you know, many people have said the worst thing they can imagine is public speaking. So, but at the same time, I feel pleased. I feel grateful. I feel delighted. I feel inspired and motivated to be able to get in front of a camera, get in front of people who are interested in how people can stay more connected.
Yeah.
So that's what we call this it's a way to mitigate trauma. Many of us have trauma in our background. We're learning about trauma suddenly in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Trauma's more and more in the conversation today. And psychologists are talking about it, teachers are talking about it, and now, as I mentioned earlier, we've been contacted by a teaching professor who's an MD at one of the major hospitals here about bringing this work into the teaching process for medical students and residents. So they'll have more empathy and they'll have greater understanding about their own needs and feelings and the needs and feelings of their patients. And another thing is that the professor we're speaking with thinks this will be really helpful in having them avoid burnout.
Yeah.
Because residents and med students work very, very long hours with very little sleep. So we're very pleased to be able to share our work. We also have done numerous 1 and 2 day workshops with organizations in Atlanta that help trafficked women to rebuild and restore their lives. We've been going there every couple of years, and now we're going to be working with a group that works with individuals who are on parole and probation. So we really see this as a very helpful language, dare I say, universal, that can bring us together on many levels.
Yeah. And to put it in perspective, I have a story to share about it, because I think by putting our truths out there, it really does, it helps create soul connections, as I like to call it, because we then can understand where a person is coming from. I had traveled to a writer's workshop in Orlando, and when I had booked my reservation, they came back and I sent a little email off and said, I have this horrific fear of heights. It's related to my trauma in my childhood. How high up is my room going to be? And the person responded, oh, we can't decide until you get there. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get there and they're going to stick me on, like the 44th floor or something crazy. And so I got a little panicky. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to throw this out. And so I just shared my truth and sent off a little email and said, here's my trauma history. And here is why the results. I have panic attacks if I am, past a 4th floor. The heights really scare me. Well, the response from this, resort, it was just a big resort, an Omni or sort of Marriott or something. I don't even remember at this point, but was so beautiful and so positive. And the young lady said, absolutely. We went ahead and booked you a room. We normally don't do that. Thank you for sharing, your story with me. When I got there, she came out, gave me a hug. It was just a very beautiful exchange, and I was extremely grateful. I sung their praises on, social media, because all I did was share my truth and my needs. And they came back, and it was a beautiful response. I wasn't demanding. I wasn't nasty. I just said, here's my needs.
It's wonderful to hear about those kind of situations. And, from an NVC perspective, my brain is already thinking, well, you reached out to create connection so you could meet your needs for safety, stability, and security, and peace of mind. And the response was yes, I want to meet your need for support. So my brain thinks about, in those. And so again, like I said, we're not used to, it wouldn't be like I would say, oh, Teri, I guess that really met your need for support, stability, and peace of mind. And you would go, huh? But,
Right.
but when we start thinking that, then I'm actually feeling like grateful that situations like this occur. So the needs and feelings create a thinking process, and we can put it into sort of what we call street NVC. And I would say, oh, great, that sounds like that was really fulfilling for you. And but in the beginning, like I said, it's a practice.
Yeah.
Practicing expressing needs and feelings, and yeah, and so there's one of the things that we've been thinking about is when we introduce this to teachers is that many children today uh, are in homes where there's abuse, and now speaking in terms of trauma, uh, when there's trauma, cortisol and adrenaline are released into the blood system. The hippocampus is the long-term memory, and short-term memory, it shrinks. That's something I think I experienced. And so we shut down and we go into survival. And it's interesting because that survival mechanism is the same survival mechanism we had when we were trying to make sure we weren't turned into lunch for a saber-toothed tiger. But somebody says, hey, why do you waste so much time? And those same chemicals start going when there's no danger. But what happened was we were brainstorming how to make this more effective for teachers and administrators. So when they can introduce this work to children, and they're aware of their needs and feelings, but they're in a small room or they're with other kids, and that parent is still in the room, and they can't say, I'm afraid of this neglect, abuse, physical, emotional abuse, even sexual. So a child can't say this as I'm worried about this because the parent or guardian or whoever the person is could grab the computer from them or the cell phone. So, but if they learn this, they could text to the teacher. And they could say, I'm feeling afraid. I'm looking at my feelings list now. I'm feeling terrified. I'm feeling worried because I have a need for safety and stability. Can you help me? And the adult, who might be an abuser, doesn't know, because then when a child has become articulate in their needs and feelings, they can send a message. So we see this as a safety net during this period when kids are having to stay at home, that they can relate their needs and feelings, especially when it comes to meeting their need for safety.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's one of the things I had heard was the rise that with the pandemic in of abuse that is occurring. Yeah, with kids being at home and teachers not being able to, and staff not being able to report it because the kids aren't in their physical presence.
Right. It's a uniquely difficult situation. You could almost call the pandemic the 11th ace, because it affects just about everyone. And from an NVC point of view, whoever the abuser is also trying to meet a need. They're trying to meet a need for understanding and, let's say, order and peace of mind. It's just that their strategy is one that causes harm. So in terms of strategies, that's another part of NVC. I have a quick story on that. I was in a school in Queens, in the Jackson Heights area, several years ago, and it was the same class of 54 kids. And we have students keep journals on how they see relationships in society, how they see them personally. And I told the teacher that I wanted the kids to keep journals. And you can buy those little 99-cent that look like a zebra, not a zebra, but black and white spots. And they said they didn't have any money. So I live in the East Village in New York City. I went to a 99-cent store and I bought 54 journals because the kids really wanted to write about relationships. And I took two shopping bags that were very strong, and I put them on my bike the day I was going to the school on both handles. I biked to 14th Street and First Avenue, where I got the L train. New Yorkers will understand this. I'm carrying these two heavy bags. I take the L train to Union Square. I change trains for the 6 train. I go to Grand Central, change trains for the 7 trains. And these are heavy bags. I get to Jackson Heights, and it's an elevated stop. And in the elevated trains, you have to go down 2 sets of stairs. And as you're going down the stairs, there's a flat section in between, so it breaks the stride. And just as I got to the flat section, I saw somebody coming up really slowly. Then I saw somebody who looked like they were really in a hurry, and I thought if they went around the slow-moving person, I'd have to stop in my tracks. And I remember thinking, don't. But they did. And the first words that came to mind were thoughtless, inconsiderate, right? Judgment, thoughtless, inconsiderate. I won't tell you what words I might have thought. I studied this word. And then I continued down. As my foot touched the sidewalk, I asked myself, well, I wonder what this person's strategy was to meet their needs. And I imagined they were going to visit their Aunt Eva, who's in the hospital and only has an hour to live. And Aunt Eva met their needs for appreciation, affection, acceptance, love, belonging, closeness, empathy. All of these needs were met. What was that person's strategy to meet their needs? Well, it included cutting me off. But then I wondered, well, maybe they saved somebody's life a week ago who was drowning. Maybe they're a living saint in their neighborhood. Maybe they're someone people can count on. And I started imagining what this person was that wasn't thoughtless and inconsiderate. Because thinking in terms of needs and feelings, what needs did she have? So it was like I remember thinking to myself, I'm free. It was like I was free of my judgmental conditioning. But, it's come back to some extent. But that was a moment where instead of seeing people as my judgments, I was seeing them as people with needs and feelings and strategies that I didn't necessarily appreciate, but they didn't have to be my judgments.
Yes. And I love that. I love it. And I so relate because I have talked about this on the podcast in the past and said, when I reached that place in my healing journey where I was able to sit at the red light behind someone who was texting and then it turned green, and instead of honking the horn and being like, get out of the way, and throwing some curse words out, instead I'd say, I paused. I had a beautiful, brilliant mind once tell me, just notice. And so I would just notice and then say to myself, and I did that exact same thing, told a story to myself. I wonder if they just received a text that their mother is dying in the hospital and they're reading that text. I wonder if they've worked a double shift and it's a doctor or a nurse and they're so tired and they just needed to rest their eyes for a second before hearing, maybe their house is only a mile away and they just need to get home and sleep. And so by doing that, I was able to just kind of take a breath. That doesn't mean I don't go beep, beep in a very nice way. Like, hey, the light's green. But yeah, it really does make a difference in being able to relate to others and respecting the needs. I say honoring others' needs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
beautiful.
Another example, Teri, you're driving down the road and a car gets too close to you and cuts you off. What do? You pull up next to them and you roll down your window and you say, that didn't meet my need for safety and stability. No, you say, you idiot. But maybe that person's rushing to pick up their child at a school and the lights have gone off and maybe they saved somebody's life. So we can imagine what's right with people, because we can't pull everybody over to the side of the road who cuts us off and say, look, I didn't appreciate your strategy to meet your needs. Could you tell me what's going on? But the more we can just play with it, imagine, well, I see so much in the world that I have judgments about, but do I want to live my life like this? Do I want to keep building this stress? And when I walk in my home and I see my family members, do I want to walk in with this grumpy mood, or do I want to say, well, I'm it's kind of challenging out there, but I see that it's easier not to judge. And the same thing is because I ride my bike everywhere in the city, and cab drivers constantly got close to me, and I would sometimes ride up to them because they'd hit a red light, and I'd say, yeah, you want to hit somebody, I need the insurance money. But what if that cab driver is taking someone to the hospital who's about ready to deliver their child? And so their needs for effectiveness, efficiency, progress, movement, I didn't appreciate their strategy to meet their needs, which included getting too close to me. So it's day by day, but we really recommend, we have a chapter on nonviolent communication in this book that I say I wrote a book, but what I really did was I spoke a book and people typed. Okay. So that's how it's better. That's the only way I could have done it. But there's a chapter, people can download it on our website, therelationshipfoundation.org or trf.net. Chapter 4 is on nonviolent communication, and Chapter 6 is on the adverse childhood experiences. And I recommend these chapters to everybody, teachers, administrators, parents. If you don't have time to read through the whole book, which is easy to read because it's small pages, big type, but to learn about NVC. And then the other thing I really recommend is buying NVC, getting your own copy by Marshall Rosenberg, and that's easily found on the internet. I believe this work could change how we live and act in the world more than anything I've ever found. And that's why it's the cornerstone of what we bring into schools and why it's opening so many doors. And there are wonderful approaches to getting along with people. There's hundreds, thousands of books. This one we found to be the most effective.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I love the idea of living in a trauma-informed world. Yeah.
Yeah. When people, the more people know about the ACEs, Cicely, my co-partner in this project, sent me a link for an ACEs workshop that was animated. It came out of England. We'll send that to you. And I started watching this, and the first couple of minutes, I was going, oh, I know all this, and I said, let me give it a little more time. And I learned so much. I've studied so much about the ACEs. Jim Sporleader, I think you know about him, the principal of Lincoln High.
Yeah, he's been on the podcast, and I consider him a friend. He's just a beautiful, beautiful soul who does amazing work in the world. Jim
is one of those. I found out about what Jim did at Lincoln about 12 years ago, or 8 years ago, and again, I say, by the grace of God, I found his email, and I said, "This is great what you're doing there," and I never expected, because at that point there were 400,000 hits on the article about Jim and Lincoln High, but he emailed me back and said, "Great what you're doing in New York." And we began what the interns called a 3-month bromance. Phone calls, emails, and eventually he flew me out, and I gave a day-long workshop for his entire staff. And then a week later, Jamie Redford came in and started filming the transformation in the school. So I have been in touch with Jim throughout the years, and he's another one. This man loves people. He cares about people. He cares about his kids. Yeah. He was just perfect that he found out about the ACEs, changed the approach in his school from the punishment model to care, understanding. That's another film, and I think that's on Amazon also.
Yeah, Paper Tigers. I mean, such a powerful documentary. Yes.
It's fantastic. And Jim now goes, as you probably know, he goes to schools all over the country.
Yeah.
And is getting the word out. So, and he's endorsed our book and our curriculum, and so we're really grateful for his support. And actually, when I mentioned that we had started to go into multiple schools here, he came on to one of our professional developments in June. And the teachers and administrators were absolutely delighted to hear from somebody who had, as you know, over a 3-year period, suspension days in that school went from 796 to 135. What school doesn't want those statistics? Graduation rates went up 5 times. This is so these kids, who did, very few of them had that sense of secure attachment in their homes. Now we're getting it in school. Now the school became their second home. And so the trauma-informed school approach, and Jim's got a book on that, the trauma-informed school approach. I think it's going to be so important because we have now the most traumatized group of children in the history of this country. And so learning about NVC, one of the things that Jim said to me is that the ACEs is the why this has to come into the schools, and the work we're doing is a piece of the how, piece of that puzzle. So that's where we're grateful for people like him and the Jamie Redford and the work you're doing, and Fritzie Horstman. We show Step Inside the Circle in all of our PDs now. It's just been a tremendous honor to be in touch with Fritzie, and she's going to actually address parent liaisons from 250 schools in a few days with us in our latest presentation. So
yes, she blew me away on, I mean, that, well, one, I watched her video, the 8-minute video. What a powerful, whoa, just amazing work that she's doing in the prison systems.
She's, I'm going to say this for the record. I think that Fritzie at some point has the momentum to change the prison system. I think her work is better, and I really think that she's going to get nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize.
That would be amazing.
I really think that could happen for her because of her care and dedication and her commitment to creating more peace in the world.
Yeah.
And I listened to her interview with you last week, and I learned so much. And I was really grateful to hear how she shared her work with you, and the language she used, and her sense of compassion.
Yes, beautiful. Certainly touched me on a heart and soul level.
Yeah, everybody should go to the internet right now and type in Step Inside the Circle. And we're a nonprofit. We're always trying to raise funds, but every time I watch Step Inside the Circle, I make a donation to Fritzie's organization.
Beautiful, beautiful.
One of the things, going back to that webinar that Cicely sent me, was seeing this word and hearing secure attachment. And I started thinking back on my own child. I learned that the world was an unsafe place. No one's there to help. I'm insignificant. Establishing avoidant and safely disconnected relationships. Hypervigilance. High state of alert. Can't trust adults. These are the kids coming into schools today. Many of them are dealing with this. And that's why teachers understand the ACEs. They can look at a kid not as a disrupted kid, but here's a kid who has they have a troubled brain. It's not that they are that their behavior is a coping mechanism. So they don't have bad behavior; they have a bad brain.
Right.
And Teri, if you could bring back this other slide, real quickly, if we have a couple more minutes.
Sure.
I want to mention about non-feelings, because this is another piece of NVC. That's there it is, the non-feelings list. When you say to someone, "I felt abandoned by you. I felt betrayed by you. I felt disrespected by you." I don't know what you're feeling when you say that. These are blaming words. So if I feel abandoned by you, what was the unmet need? I had a need for inclusion. I had a need for consideration. I had a need for friendship. So I'm seeing that these are unmet needs, and I felt disappointed. I felt upset. I felt conflicted. I felt worried. When I say I feel abandoned, I feel disrespect. So I feel judged. I feel put down. I feel neglected. Oh, you're someone who neglects people. I feel manipulated. So these are in our book and our curriculum. Non-feelings. I feel used by you. No, I feel upset. I have a need. What are my needs when there's a sense of being used? So these words are out of my vocabulary. I feel judged. I feel dumped on. I feel hassled. I feel ignored. Can you see how these words?
Yeah.
They're fight starters.
Yeah, I mean it's resonating. I think, oh my gosh, I use these words. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very freeing when you can look at these words and say, oh, I felt left out. Oh, so you're somebody who leaves people out. That's what you're saying when you say, I feel ignored. I feel insulted. Really? So you're somebody who insults people. How about I felt upset when you said, why do you waste so much time? So Teri, thank you for showing these slides for anybody who's watching this visually. And this is in the Nonviolent Communication book.
Yeah.
And it's not, there's 25 words there, 30 words. We don't have to use them. Notice I almost said we don't need to use them.
Yeah.
We use the word need all the time. I need to take a break. No, I have a need for rest. I have a need for relaxation. Same way with the feelings word. I feel like having some pizza. Did you see pizza on that feelings list?
Right.
I feel like taking a walk. I feel like going to the movies. They're not feelings. We use the needs and feelings, words all the time in our language, and these words have become so significant. And Teri, I'm looking at my needs list right now, and I noticed that your throat is a little sore, and I'm wondering if you need some space to clear your throat, or if you
yes, a good cough.
You have a need for choice to take a break from this interview for a moment and clear your throat.
Yes.
Okay, so here we're practicing NVC.
Right. Beautiful. So okay. I'm going to do that and clear my throat.
I will. I'll have a look at my needs and feelings. I'm so grateful that you've invited me onto your program. I'm just so passionate about how can people create more connection, meet their need for connection, understanding, closeness, progress, inclusion, love, empathy. We have like about 5 minutes left, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let me tell you very quickly about the empathy piece. We do introduce a lot before I explain about empathy. There's many books on empathy. It's a very popular subject. It has many layers to it, but what we teach is something we introduce in our programs is empathic listening. We don't say empathetic listening. It's another way to say it because it has the word pathetic in it.
Oh, yeah.
So I like to say empathic instead of empathetic. What we do is we put teachers, kids in pairs and have them tell the other person, A and B, something that annoyed or disappointed them. And so they might say, oh, the traffic was terrible getting to work. I'm so annoyed, and I've left my lunch at home, and it's really been stressful. So your friend tells you this, and then what do you say? Well, often what I used to say was, oh, you had a bad day. Let me tell you about me. Let me tell you about my traffic. One-upping. Well, Teri, maybe you should get up earlier in the morning. Unrequested advice. Fixing. Well, Teri, probably want to get your car started before you go out, fixing, advising, analyzing. Teri, every week you say the same thing. Are you getting any empathy? Well, Teri, look, the day's over, so let me just put it behind you. Consoling. Did you ask to be consoling? And finally, Teri, you should be glad you have a job. So discounting. So what we recommend is someone says they had a bad day, just simply say, I hear you. And then silence. Or tell me more. When I introduce this, when I work with couples, if there's a situation and one partner says to the other, hey, the drapes, look at the drapes, they're all crooked. And the partner says, instead of defending and saying, well, put them up yourself, or what, if it wasn't, you hadn't told me to do it this way, blah, blah, blah. And they criticizing, defending, criticizing, defending, they say, I hear you. Tell me more. Well, where's the fight? Tell me more. I hear, is there more to that? And in a case of something that's sort of really upsetting or tragic, you can say, I don't know what to say, but I'm just so glad you told me.
Yeah. And
usually if somebody tells us something that's kind of tragic, say, I'm sorry. Well, it's okay. We want to say, we are sorry. But how about, I don't know what to say? Because often we don't know what to say. So that's a piece of what we call the empathy, the art of listening, where we say, I hear you, tell me more, is there more to that? Sometimes we want to say, yikes, or wow. Like if you say the word wow, you can almost feel it in your chest. And just this act of listening gives a person so much space. And this is what many people call being present.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm a huge Wayne Dyer fan, Dr. Wayne Dyer. In one of the books I had read of his, he recommended if someone is saying something that you disagree with, or they're wanting to express a very passionate argument against something, and to just say, okay, and leave it at that. And I have utilized that, and I'm telling you, it is amazing how powerful that word can be in just honoring their need to express what they need to express.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hearing in what you're saying. And beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. That's it's good. It's good to get some, another perspective and another way to stay present.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to touch upon before we close out?
Yeah, I didn't say much about the adverse childhood experiences. We are making teachers aware of that so that they understand that kids really have a need for understanding, and that they may have come from an environment where it's sort of like this. You're in the woods and you see a bear. Your thinking process doesn't turn on. You say, oh, there's a bear. Well, I have dinner at 6 and I have to get this paper to my company. No, it's like you run, hit the amygdala, flight or freeze. And for some kids, the bear comes home at night.
Yeah.
And so we tell teachers that they do not enter the school doors ready to learn. They are hyper vigilant. They are stressed out. They're high strung. And so that to understand that they're doing the best they can, in a way, their strategy to find a way to calm their nervous system might be to do and say things that aren't conducive to learning, but that the punishment model generally makes things worse. And as Jim Sporleader stresses, is replacing that punishment model with care and understanding, and saying, instead of what's wrong with you, what's going on with you, and giving a child that space. And we're also introducing what's being called the adverse community experiences, discrimination, street violence, racism, exploitation. All of these are also adverse conditions, mostly in high needs areas. where there is this disruption, and it's hard for a kid to study. It's hard for this family to get by. So in addition to the 10 ACEs, there's now the adverse community experiences. So there's so much to take into consideration when working with children, when being with anyone, that people are not necessarily their behavior. It's their strategy to meet their needs that you might not appreciate, but how can we stay connected? And I'll end on that note, is that we are really dedicated to this principles. How can we stay connected and get and move over to another horizon where judgments fall away, and we can start to live in a different world?
Yes, beautiful. Well, I have learned so much. I had not yet heard of adverse community experiences. I've certainly talked about it, but not from that racism and bullying and so forth, group bullying. Social media is a whole other, I mean, really could be considered under that community.
We outlined 5 of them: poverty, exploitation, street violence, racism, and discrimination.
Yeah.
So the poverty is an ACE.
Yeah.
So we're learning to see the broader picture of who people are, especially children, but all of us adults too are we're working on our healing from things that may have happened that took us out of connection. And so understanding about the ACEs and practicing NVC, we think that these are very helpful points of awareness and tools to use to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. It talks, to me, this is all that we're talking about is just, again, acknowledging one another's pain, acknowledging one another's journey and honoring it, and where we are and where each person is. So the work you're doing is just beautiful, and I thank you for it.
Thank you too. It's really a gift that you're giving in bringing these kinds of speakers on to create more awareness.
Awesome. All right. Well, so how do people get a hold of you again and get in touch with your organization?
Our URL is easy to get to. It's T as in Tom, R as in Rachel, F as in Francine, trf.net. And we're also at the relationshipfoundation.org, and our phone number's there, and we have a lot of different free tools there. We have sections of our curriculum in our book that people can download and take a look at. And so we have a lot of it there. We have some different videos, and we are always grateful to have people come and take a look.
Wonderful. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure, and thank you again.
Same here.
All right, everyone, thank you for listening in today. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening today to the Healing Place podcast with your host and trauma warrior, Teri Wellbrock. If you enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about Teri, her mission, and the Hope for Healing journey, visit Teri's website at www.teriwellbrock.com. Thank you for liking, commenting, sharing, and offering your reviews on our YouTube channel, audio outlets, and Facebook page. And as Teri reminds us, until next time, remember, be gentle with yourself.